So we're in Vancouver, East Vancouver, I think. Is that right, Hunter? East side. Vancouver. You're rehearsing down the road.
Yes.
But we're somewhere else, and this is really nice. This is all kind of in relation to your live set, isn't it? This drapery and dressing.
Yeah, this is from Magdalene too.
Yeah, incredible. And you're preparing for a new run, which starts tomorrow. How are rehearsals going?
I've not started yet.
Really?
Yeah, straight after this, back in.
Oh my God, doesn't the show start this tomorrow?
Yeah.
Right. You feeling okay about it?
Yeah.
I was watching this really interesting documentary on the way over here about this older band that came up in the early 90s punk scene called Jawbreaker, who I loved. And the essence I got from it was that people used to go out there and perform with zero rehearsal, zero ideas of what they were going to do, just to release, just to get things out.
Okay.
And you do that, but you also put so much into rehearsal to make sure that the timing and the emotion is connected to the detail and the part of it that translates and extends the vision, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into what you do.
Yeah, well, my favourite motto is preparation plus opportunity equals success.
Where did you read that for the first time? Or hear about it?
I've been thinking about that since I was a teenager. Preparation. Sure, I'm starting rehearsals today to refine everything, but the preparation for this tour has been like...
Years.
Yeah, well, for this, I'd say like a year long. So I'm just not stressing because I know that I know it all. Do you know what I mean? I know it's all in there. There's some revisions from like the first Magdalene tour, but the practice means that the like recall is sharp and we're all tight as a band. We know all the music.
It makes sense because, and I think what people may not know, maybe real fans will know this, in most rehearsals you go and you learn from scratch. You learn whatever you need to learn for that particular performance. That's why it's been 3 weeks trying to learn. But as you said, you know, there's elements of what you do on stage now that you've been learning, wouldn't even say practicing, just learning and trying to master and then applying that to the live show later.
Exactly, yeah.
So what leads you into a place where you want to learn martial arts and you want to learn any particular form of dance? And I know you have a huge open curiosity. Has that always been the case?
Yeah, I've always been like that. I love practicing things. I love learning new things. I love learning about different cultures through a practice that's tied to that culture. I actually discovered Wushu through a director called Chloe Zhao. We kind of had quite a fun but lonely and disastrous Cannes Film Festival together a few years ago.
Okay, why?
Well, Chloe was, you know, a relatively new director then. She's now gone on as directing an incredible Marvel movie. But back then she was quite unknown and she actually won the Director's Choice Award, but that was at the end of the festival. So she spent the whole festival being kind of like a newbie. I was there in support of somebody else and we just couldn't get in anywhere.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah, it's horrible.
I've done that one.
Yeah.
It's rough. You end up sitting on a big boat for 3 days, wondering how you get up the hill.
Yeah, exactly. So we couldn't get in anywhere. I couldn't even get into my own hotel. Like I kept on being like stopped and like ID'd every time. And so we just ended up hanging out together for the whole of Cannes, sort of like two misfits and having to walk for like 40 minutes just to go and get breakfast. And
add to the fact that you were also, dare I say, a bit of a +1 in that scenario.
I was a bit of a +1, yeah. Exactly. So I just couldn't get in anywhere, which was fine. But luckily I had Chloe there and we were just hanging out. And she's Chinese and she said to me like, oh, you know, you should have a look at Wushu, like with your movement and stuff. I think you'd really love it. And I was like, okay. So I literally went back to LA, like Googled like Wushu LA and found a Wushu master called Master Hu basically choreographed for the Chinese Olympics. Started training with him and then the sword, and then I started to, and I don't know, and then I named my sword Lilith. And then like...
Where'd that come from?
Well, from Adam's first wife.
Right.
Who said she didn't want to be subservient to men, so she got banished to hell.
So it's time for retribution through the guise of a sword.
Yeah, so then Lilith and I just started like getting on, and then here I am kind of like a...
And do you always get along, or are there times, because listen, training with a sword is no joke. People think that it's like some kind of plastic rehearsal scenario, but it's not, it's real.
Yeah, you can hurt yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, she sends me warnings every now and again, but only when I'm not concentrating.
Still scratches and cuts here and there?
Yeah.
It must keep you really in the moment.
It
Very
does.
much so.
Yeah, but same with pole as well. I think that's why I like it. It's like that kind of present mind.
What do you like when you're not in the present mind, when your mind strays?
I'm a big daydreamer. Yeah, I daydream all the time. Like I always have like loads of ideas. I always joke that I'm like, I like call up like one of like the people I work with one day, and I'd be like, I've got an idea.
Oh,
All I need is 3 elephants, a shoelace, a penguin, and a large umbrella. Meet me in town.
So like, who are you, MacGyver?
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Yeah, I'm a bit like that.
Yeah, and it can be frustrating on your team too when you have ideas on ideas on ideas on ideas because you're hiring them to help to focus. Great success comes from focus, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you've been doing for this record and for this tour, and then you sort of put something in between that and the result.
Yeah.
That features an elephant and a ball of string, and they're going to get frustrated.
Oh, I don't know. Actually, we don't get that. But we are pretty focused. There's a lot to get done. I have like my, what do you call, like strings to my bow, you know? And I train a lot. And when a sort of baby comes into its time, then I know that it's time to like put that thing into the world.
It's hard to know when that line is though, isn't it? Because you can always improve in these things and there are masters at it. There are people who are like so incredibly good at it that they ultimately spend their entire life focusing on this stuff. And to know when you want to go out there and present that and put it in front of, you know, the world on, you know, Jimmy Fallon, which was incredible. That performance was so unbelievable and it showed real skill, but how do you know when you're ready, when you're learning something like that?
Well, I think you're constantly learning, you know, like, I guess I know I'm ready when I feel like I'm starting to like live it instead of just doing it. Like when I can take risks, like with pole or sword, when I can just stay in that pose a bit longer or move a bit faster or lean a little bit further, then I know that I can take risks and then I know that I'm expressing myself. And then it becomes more than just like moving your body to counts.
How important are risks to you on, you know, in the way that you move through your life? What is your relationship like with risk taking?
I think I'm a big risk taker. I think like in my early life, like I was kind of forced into that position. Like I was brought up in the country in England, and my mum was a single parent for a significant part of my life, and I was like the only person of color in the town really where I lived. So that already puts you in a position where you are...
You're at risk.
Yeah, at risk, you know? And then to want to do things, to want to be able to like excel out of that environment where the odds seem quite against you. You know, I knew that if I wanted to go and get like a good, solid education, my mum said to me, like, if you want to go to like a good school, you have to get a scholarship. That's the only way. So I remember like just studying so hard, like even when I was 12, I remember like doing exam papers at the weekends, just over and over and over again, doing exam papers. So over the summer, so that I could get into like a good school, and like my mum wanted me to have a good education. So I think even from then, that's like a risk. And then turning up at that school as the scholarship kid with a, you know, working class mum.
The work continues.
Single parent.
Yeah.
Only black girl in the school.
They're not slow clapping you down the hallway.
They're not.
For sure.
Yeah, they were not. So I think just my life has put me in that position where I've had to...
Preparation and...
Preparation plus opportunity equals success.
There it is. What do you think the impact of being raised by single parents had on you as you've gotten older and become more mature in your own life?
That's a big question. I think like a really pivotal point for me was maybe when I was 17 or 18 and I had moved to London and I was going to Croydon College. I was living in South London and I was watching TV with my mum, just eating like TV dinner, like trays in our laps, like watching TV, how we always did. And I just remember my mum like putting the TV on mute and she said to me, Talia, like you don't want a normal life. She was like, this is what a normal life is. She was like, you don't want this for yourself. She was like, just go and see the world and travel and just use your talents and like go and like go get it, basically. She was like, you do not want this.
As a parent myself, I think about moments. You want to grab moments when you think that they're going to have real lasting impact on the people that you love, and in particular on your kids. You want to know that this was a moment that they'll remember and will set them on a path to achieve something of real value in their life. But you're never sure if it sinks in.
Yeah.
And I think like how proud your mum would be to think about the fact that she did that very deliberately.
Yeah.
But there's no guarantees that you would take that. As a young person, you could sit there and go, shut up, mum, whatever, I don't care what you're saying, whatever, put the TV back up. You know?
Yeah, I think maybe a part of me did, but then it does sink in, even if it's a few years later, like it does sink in. Like eventually when I moved out of home and I had like 4 jobs, I was working as a youth worker, I was working in retail, I was working as a barmaid, and I just thought to myself like, you know, I've like worked so hard with like dancing and singing. I just thought that I wanted to do something with my life that would bring me joy.
So much of your journey from just this conversation, what we've spoken about in the past, is about trying to, as you say, prepare, to focus, to improve, which ultimately leads to some form of control, I think. Comes to a position of wanting to control your environment, to be brilliant at something, control the result. When I listen to this album, I feel like you're taking control from a very wildly uncontrolled experience. I feel like I'm listening to you try to understand and control something that was actually pretty out of control. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yeah, definitely. But I'm lucky that I get that release, you know? I feel grateful that I'm able to put my experiences and put my hardships into work.
What was it like when you started making this record? How out of control was it?
Pretty out of control.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was pretty out of control. I always like say, you know, people say like, oh, you know, like bad things come in threes. And you're like, okay, that's like one bad thing. And then it's like another bad thing. And then like your friend will be like, yeah, but this is like the third bad thing. So you know that's it. And you're like, okay, cool. And then the 3 months goes by and then you're like, okay, like, is this like an extension of the other one, or are we starting again?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's kind of like that.
Because I will not have a fourth. So it's one or the other.
Yeah, exactly.
This is either 3.2
Yeah, exactly.
or it's 1.
And then you're on 5 and you're like, oh, I see, this is just the new set
This
of
is
3.
the second of the second set of 3.
Yeah, exactly.
It felt like that.
It did feel like that, which is fine, you know, like that's totally okay. And I'm grateful for all the experiences that I've had. I'm grateful that I had to face a lot of things alone.
But when you're in the middle of it, and we'll get to the gratitude because we're here because of the gratitude, because I know you're in a great space.
Yeah.
And the hour's about to come out. It's a triumph. So we're going to get to all the joy.
Okay, you want to keep me back in
I want to take you back to the terror. No.
Okay, cool. I'm trying to like make it positive, but I'm grateful. You're like, no, stay there.
We're all grateful, but to get to gratitude, we have to go back to the lack of. No, I'm curious about the human side of this process you've been through. And I'm curious about the moments before you're able to put yourself back together, learn, grow through it.
Yeah.
When it is at 3 + 2,
Okay.
how you process that and what you learnt about yourself. And dare I say, first, before we even go there, what are we talking about here? What was going on?
Lots of things. I had a lot of health issues. With the health issues came like just not being able to be as physical as I usually am. So just being really tired. And for a long time, I didn't know why I felt so unwell.
Yeah.
And that was the most frustrating part, actually. You know, being on set and feeling really like I'm unwell. But
Did you know you were unwell?
No, I knew I was.
You knew you were unwell.
Yeah, no, I knew
and they
I
couldn't
was.
find anything at that point, or you just, wow.
No, I just kept on going to doctors and having blood tests and the diet. I was always like on these like diets with like, no, like don't eat this or like eat more of this or you're allergic to this, you know, and having like acupuncture all the time and just, you know, trying to stay on top of something, but actually,
what it is.
no, just not knowing. And that was actually worse because it was just frustrating and I felt like I was letting myself down, and then I started to feel like I was letting like my team down, and it was all very like internal. I think that like people always thought I worked really hard and that, you know, on the outside it seemed like I was doing good, but I just knew that I was really sick, and I would like look at myself in the mirror and like I just looked sick. Do you know what I mean? I can't really explain it. So that was like really frustrating because I don't know. I just knew that I was the only person that could get myself better.
We search for support in all kinds of places when it's like that. Like, I've been there, you just want someone else to diagnose you and fix you.
Yeah, definitely.
And when they can't, but you know,
Yeah.
it's a lonely place.
Yeah, it is lonely. But sometimes that's good, you know? That's one thing I've learned is that I am in myself. Like, I like live inside here and I have to take responsibility for this. And that is actually really empowering. That sense of loneliness is really empowering once I accepted it. And I'm still like, you know, dealing with that now.
Are you good in your own company?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an only child, so
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Like,
And what do you like in the company of others when you want to be on your own?
I think I'm pretty chill. Like, I'm quite a relaxed person, I think. I'm quite a chill person. I'm a very tolerant person. I can be like the biggest joker and like be getting up and like doing all the silly voices and the dances and acting everything out. But I can also sometimes be just really quiet. I can be by myself in a group of people as well. I can just like zone out, which I do as well.
That's a superpower.
Yeah, I do zone out. I think it's not really for me to say. You'll have to ask one of my friends.
Yeah. Throughout the record, it's heartbreaking at times, really heartbreaking at times, especially when there's a sense of there's that classic unrequited experience that's trailing through it.
Yeah.
That the joy of finding someone in your life that you love so much, and then obviously when you lose them, you come to that place where you're grateful for the experience, but the pain at that time is really tough.
Yeah, it's really tough.
Really tough. Writing those songs, going through that experience, putting that down. Can you describe that feeling, what it was like at the moment when you were writing those songs?
Oh, it was like a big release, I think. To begin with, it was scary because I think I'd never written from, well, I've always written from a really honest place, but an honest place at 22 or 23 with your life experience is different to an honest place than years on when you've experienced responsibility and heartbreak and a kind of glimpse of real adulthood, you know? So I think to begin with, it was I was finding phrases and words that kind of shocked myself, but then I felt good after I wrote Cellophane and
I was going to say, was Cellophane one of those moments?
Yeah, then I was oh, it's okay. I was it's actually okay. Or Home with You or Thousand Eyes.
Yeah.
Then I was it's okay. And then writing things after that, Mirrored Heart or Fallen Alien, it became not easier in process, but just kind of easier in the acceptance of myself to be able to put that on the table. And I think obviously showing people your heart when it's raw, it's vulnerable, you know? It's one thing showing people your heart when you're feeling sexy and sassy and you're 22, 23 running around New York Miss Thing. Do you know what I mean? Oh, I'm so sexy and so vulnerable at the same time. I'm discovering my sexuality. That's hot, do you know what I mean? But then it's another thing where oh, I'm broken now, you know? It felt different, but I didn't give myself a hard time over I was into it.
Oh, it's a huge step as an artist to be able to capture that.
Yeah.
You can master all those other things. You can go out and you can use the combination of focus and discipline, talent, to master anything you put your mind to.
Yeah.
But to put your heart out there on a record like you've done on this, which great artists have all done throughout their careers and their lives, that's a step into artistry that is so unique and it's individual. You talk about Thousand Eyes, talk about Cellophane, two important parts of the record. They start and end the record, they bookend the album.
Yeah.
Both of them kind of, to me, from a sort of outsider's point of view, listening to the record a few times, deal loosely in a similar space, which is getting back to that original observation about controlling what felt out of control. The idea of desiring privacy to make your own mistakes, to live your life, to be with someone you care about. You didn't have that luxury. You can't help who you fall in love with, but you went through that, right? That experience of attention.
Yeah, of course. I was speaking about this earlier, that kind of unmeshing is a really interesting experience.
Can you describe what you mean by unmeshing?
Unmeshing, when you're with somebody, your lives become very entwined with your friends and family and your routine, and then the unmeshing is you're then by yourself, and then it's finding your own morning routine or your nighttime routine, or even something as simple as oh, wow, now I can decorate the living room how I want it. Do you know what I mean? These things as before you're considering.
There's compromise to relationships.
Yeah, you're just considering somebody else, and then it's you, and then you have to really find out. Well, I had to really find out who I was. But I've always known who I am. You know, I have always really known who I am. But it's just kind of discovering who I was in adult crisis was a big thing. I mean, I remember even when I had my operation, waking up and my family had gone home, my friends had gone home, and just kind of having no one to call. Not because nobody loves you, or not because there is truly no one to call, but just because why? Say if you're in a relationship and something good happens and you have someone, you can call and just say something silly, or something bad happens, you can just call and just say something minor, and it doesn't have to be a big deal, you can just share, but then having that gone, you know? So I remember just waking up and it was just nobody, and just being I didn't want to call my mom and stress her out or anything, she just come back. I didn't want a thing to happen, something's wrong, but just waking up and just being oh, it's just me, this is just me. But that's also great. It's great. And I have a dog, and we hang, and I feel I've never known myself better. I've never felt younger. I feel I have little child inside me that's like alive.
Well, you've achieved so much already, and just in terms of your learning. From what I can tell, what you're going through, just absorbing and, you know, opening yourself up to. You seem to be somebody who faced that adult crisis with curiosity, rather than you didn't disappear into a black space, at least not for long.
Well, no, not at all. I mean, as most people know, like Spike called me like 3 or 4 weeks after my operation, was like, come to LA. I was like, okay.
Wow, so that all happened really soon after.
Yeah, like I think I was on set like 4 or 5 weeks after my operation. Yeah, I was on set, I couldn't lift up my hands. Like I couldn't really like lift my arms above here because all my organs were stuck together, like scar tissue, like.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was like on set and I just remember being like this and having to warm up so much to be able to get through it.
Oh, and you smashed that.
Yeah, it was really fun.
That was awesome.
Yeah, it was great though, like. And I didn't really want to like say too much to anyone about what had happened because I didn't want to be like, oh no, like don't do it. So I kind of kept it like a secret until like the first day of the shoot.
That's so mad.
I know.
I love it though.
But I was happy that I did that. I wouldn't like don't try this at home.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend it.
It's not for everybody, kids.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
you're going to have major invasive surgery, perhaps don't go and work on a very expensive ad with Spike Jones.
Yeah,
soundtrack
where you're
by
dancing around.
Yeah.
With a 3-day shoot non-stop.
That was
It was like
wicked,
a
though.
week of dance rehearsals, yeah.
I loved it because, you know, I didn't know where you were as a fan. None of us did. You were kind of, but I didn't realize you were going through this kind of really difficult physical situation.
Yeah.
And it's also weird knowing where you are, but not in a traditional sense. Like we would see you in pictures and not hear you in music, which is a strange thing, isn't it? Especially for someone like you, I'd imagine, who never really sought out for that kind of attention. Was that really difficult, going through that level of attention, the cameras and stuff, which I know still are fascinated by, because you're a fascinating individual, but the door was open to them, you see.
Yeah. It just really had nothing to do with me. That's how I feel about it. Like, it really had nothing to do with me. And I knew that at the time, and I know that now. And you know that phrase, like, your monkey's your circus?
No.
Yeah, like, your monkey's your
Right.
circus. It kind of felt like that.
Yeah.
And I don't have any monkeys anymore. Like,
Yeah.
that's how I feel. Like, it was just like a time in my life where I was like caught up in something that it had nothing to do with me, you know, or my music, or like anyone really that was, you know, into that side of it. I just isn't really like somebody that necessarily like is a follower of my music in that way. So it just felt like this different side of the world that I was suddenly exposed to that I really had no business being in. I tried my best to navigate it with as much grace and as much patience as possible.
And did it test those things?
Not on me, no, I'm quite calm. So no, I don't think so. And I can definitely like vocalize how I feel to like my friends and those who are close to me. So no, it didn't test it, but I was just aware of it, I think.
Yeah, of course, how can you not be?
Yeah.
There's some really emotional moments on this record, and I definitely felt it. Like I was drawn into the experience and felt emotion. And do you get emotional listening to your own music?
Sometimes on this one I do.
I bet.
Yeah. For me, like the saddest part of this record is the bridge in Sad Day.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why, that makes me feel sad sometimes when I'm on stage.
Sad Day's an important moment, actually, on the record.
So I think Sad Day is a really sad song, but even though like it's kind of like happy as well.
I don't know about happy. Have you identified why I didn't get happiness from it? Have you identified why it's sad for you, even though you wrote it?
I don't know why. If we knew why art made us sad or happy, then you could bottle it and make loads of money, couldn't you? So I don't know why. I don't know why it is sad. It just has those ingredients. Then it's not something you can plan when you're like writing either. It's not something that
for sure.
you can't think like, oh yeah, you just put the chord like this, or you create that space. Like it does just happen. But yeah, I think like Mirrored Heart's quite sad as well. I cry a lot on stage to Mirrored Heart.
Yeah. Do you enjoy that? Letting the emotion come in front of people like that?
Sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, it must be amazing. I'd imagine it's amazing. That's the point, isn't it, to get lost in that experience?
Yeah, I mean, so when I do shows, I can't remember them afterwards. I remember like the first song, and then I kind of like, it happens.
Have you ever written a song out of a dream?
That's interesting. I've never written a song out of a dream, but I definitely have lots of voice notes out of dreams that I've not made into songs.
Do you have any recurring dreams?
No, not really anymore. When I was a child, I used to have recurring dreams, but not really as an adult. But I have quite like, have quite wild, vivid dreams.
What are your sleep habits like? Are you a good sleeper?
I go through phases. I'd say on the whole I'm a bad sleeper, but I don't mind it. My problem is just getting into bed.
Right, calling the day to an end.
Yeah, like I just find that hard. Like just getting into bed. Like sometimes I'll be like, okay, cool, go home early, like make some food, do everything I need to do. Oh, let's watch this little documentary, that's nice. Then I'm like, okay, it's 10:30, I'm gonna be asleep by 11:30. But then sometimes like 3:30 a.m. and I'm just kind of like thinking, and I'm a potterer.
But also your ideas and your creativity is like, your reputation in that department amongst those who know you is pretty strong.
Oh, good.
You know, you obviously just keep going and just keep trying to find a way to manifest these ideas, right?
Yeah.
All the time.
Yes.
Is that the most fulfilling part of your life?
Yes.
That's the part when you're at your most happy.
Yeah.
And what does it feel like when you get to that place when you can manifest something from, when it all starts to come into shape?
Oh, it's great. I mean, Fallon was great the other day. Just to be able to do that, and it's like, oh, it's just like a big weight off my mind. I think, okay, at least I know that I've done that, and it's on record. Same way I felt about Cellophane, or, you know, the visual for Sad Day as well. Just to be able to know that I've done that, and I can just, like, not think about it anymore. Like, of course, I'll keep on growing those skills and I'll get better and better. Like, I feel like, you know, how I danced on Fallon the other day, like, I know that has grown from how I danced in Cellophane, the video, which is always really nice, you know, and you can see that progression, but just to know that you've recorded it, and then, you know, when I'm an old woman, I can just watch that and I can be like, yeah, that was that period of time and I nailed that thing. If I don't nail it, it will just keep on, like, playing on my mind.
Your voice on this album is like, you've really extended yourself vocally, and it feels like that's something that you've gone deep into on a study level as well, in terms of really identifying where your range is. And it's not about expressing yourself through more power, it's like expressing yourself through more emotion, I feel like.
Yeah.
How did you get yourself there, and just talk us through how you found a new voice for this record to help you convey what you wanted to say?
Well, ironically, I think that, like, my new voice is my old voice. I have come from singing in cabaret. I've been a wedding singer. I've, like, sang in cocktail bars all over London. I was a part of, like, a very, like, avant-garde cabaret scene, like, in my early 20s. And I would sing, like, big, like, Aretha Franklin or, like, Janis Joplin songs. So I think when I started to make my own music, I just didn't want that because I was still working in those spaces. So to, like, I don't know, like, when I'd be in the studio, I'd think, like, I don't want to sing a big song, or I don't want to use, like, my full range, because honestly, it just felt cheesy. If I'm honest with you, I just thought it was cheesy.
So why did you find yourself in those places in the first place before you started making your own music? Like, how did you find yourself singing cabaret and doing all these different things?
Because I always have. Like, I was training in opera from when I was, like, 11, and I was singing with a jazz band from when I was 13.
Wow.
So, like, I've always, like, that has been a big part of my life, you know? There'd be, like, an adult jazz band, and then, like, I'd come on stage, as you know, and, like, sing with them and, like, scat and, like, tell everyone when they can have their solos and stuff like that. And that's...
At that age?
Yeah.
That's super precocious. How did that land around people?
Precocious?
Well, if you're at that age and you're telling people, like, go there and do this and do that and leading...
That's part of being a jazz band. That's actually part of, like, the job of, like, a jazz singer, is that you're there and...
No, I get it. I love it. But I'm just saying, like, at that age, to be already in that position at, like, 11, 12, 13 and be doing that is, like...
But that's performing. That's what it's like, because everyone's just, like, freestyling, so you have to have, like, cues. Do you know what I mean? Like, you have to turn around and you have to be like, okay, now you, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And tonight, now we've got John and he's on the drums, do you know what I mean? But it wasn't precocious, it was cute, do you know what I mean? It was like a...
Maybe you think precocious is a bad word. I actually think...
Yeah, like when you're, like, a kid and you're, like, good at stuff, that's the worst thing you can call, like, a talented kid.
Maybe, but I actually have grown into, like, quite liking that word. I think it shows... I think it shows a high level of ambition at a young age.
Okay.
Right? Well, the reason I bring that up is because most kids aren't in that environment. They're thinking about pop music and they're thinking about trying to get on X Factor and all this kind of shit. And you're out there doing other things in a much deeper way.
Yeah.
What did pop music mean to you at that moment in time? Were you a fan of that environment, or were you just somewhere else altogether?
Well, like I said, I'm, like, at this time, I'm, like, a working class girl in, like, a private Catholic school, like, bullied quite badly. Those moments were my freedom. Like, at school, I was such a nerd, you know? Like, I was bullied so badly, I had to leave my school in the end, because I just actually, like, couldn't take it anymore.
That's horrendous.
Yeah, it was hell. But, like, those moments on stage, those moments where, like, of being like celebrated for like having something and no one could say anything. That's some of like the happiest moments of my young teenage years.
That was the antidote to the reality you were facing on the other side
Oh
of
yeah,
it.
definitely. It was great. Like to go somewhere and like, you know, have people commend you for something and not make fun of you. Because you have to remember, like, this is 20 years ago now. This is like pre-internet. This is pre like X Factor or Pop Idol or Britain's Got Talent. Like doing ballet, singing opera and wanting to sing in jazz bands was not cool. Now it's cool. Like now, like if, you know, because of the internet and like Instagram and all these things, like kids can dance and you are celebrated for your creativity. That was like my safe haven. That was my escape. Like going to like dance class, and it was great being able to be so young and like know what I wanted to do and have a focus.
So on LP1, to a degree, we're not seeing that side of you. It's being disguised somewhat because you're looking for a way to find a new voice in a new environment.
Well, I think like LP1 was me like becoming an adult. I mean, that's why I called it LP1, because I just didn't know if it should have a title. You know, it just still felt so much like a exploration, and it was very truly like who I was. You know, at the time I was working, I was a house singer at the Box in London. I was kind of like, I guess like a bit of like a club kid and, you know, just like on the scene and going out, and I was part of like a really progressive girl crew who have all gone on to do like really great things. So whether it's like Sharmadine from like War Nails and Carrie Munden of Cassette Player, and there was just like a little crew of us that were all friends, and we would kind of like travel around to like Berlin and do this thing called London Takeover, and we'd go and throw a big party at like Bread and Butter in Berlin or something like that. That's kind of around when I started writing LP1. It was the truth of like the girl that I was then, but LP1 to me feels like a real like hole punch. You know, people say, oh, the problem with your second album is that you spend your whole life making your first album and then you go to make your second album and there's not a lot of substance. I feel like I was lucky that LP1 was a real hole punch of a couple of years of where I was at. And then now in Magdalene, I've been able to kind of reach back into my earlier years and pull out my opera training and just more of like the classical things that I enjoyed growing up. It's
a revelationary experience to listen to the record and hear that voice. I mean, I think people, you know, we've known that it's there because we've seen it on stage now for a while, but to hear it on a record like this, start to finish, and really focus in that tone, in that environment, especially when you're dealing with this like very emotional material, it kind of sounds out-of-worldly sometimes, which is really great. The idea of bringing this iconic religious figure into music and applying it thematically, and it's like, it feels specific and at times it feels super broad in terms of what Magdalene means as a title. Yeah. When did you kind of identify that there was another figure that you could use in terms of creating this imagery, not just yourself?
Yeah, I think it's just that when I realized that so many other women had kind of gone through like what I'd been through, and maybe that is like, you know, unfortunately still part of being a woman, that kind of like free emotional labor that we put into all of our relationships, you know? That like unpaid work of nurturing, and it's something that we're just taught. I'm from a generation where, as a woman, I was taught that your Prince Charming would choose you, and when he did, you were grateful. And it was more about like being chosen than you asking like, what's right for me and what do I need and what are my boundaries and what do I need to be nurtured or to feel complete? And that's very interesting because I envy girls that are kind of 12 or 13 now growing into their womanhood, because there's so much like positive, so many positive affirmations and imagery. Because the conversation has changed. When I was younger, there was not that conversation. Yeah. But I'm indoctrinated, and my generation is indoctrinated. So it's just about like undoing those threads. I feel I like pull these threads out of my brain of things that I was like told.
Untangling them?
Yeah, it's like untangling. Not even untangling, just pulling it out. Do you know what I mean? Like things that I was told as a child through like subliminally like watching soaps and cartoons and these things that you take in as a woman and you think, oh, like I need to be like this, or this is what being a good mum is, or this is what being a good wife is, or I think that subconsciously I definitely took that message in, and for me, Magdalene is unraveling that and just finding my voice without society's whispers.
So as you pull all these threads out, it leaves you with this space to be able to fill with other things. And it's not other people's design or other people's conditioning.
Yeah.
It's what you learn and what you put in.
Yeah.
So what excites you now? What are you going to fill this space with? And how is your life changing now that you're starting to pull these things out?
I feel now like my time is so precious. I feel like my body is so precious. I feel like words are so precious. I just have like a newfound respect for like keeping the right temperature around me that like suits me. I feel more open, I feel softer. I feel like I giggle more. I feel like now Magdalene's finished, I feel like I can have a new blueprint for who I want to be as a human and how I want to live my life and how I want to make my art.